rotten,
Bacon with eggs is a popular breakfast. The pious young man prays every morning.
pious,
The mole is making holes in the garden.
mole,
The glacier is made up of big ice blocks.
glacier,
Ever since you started exercising, you've become so much more slender.
slender,
These are such lovable characters.
lovable,
In autumn, maple leaves turn red.
Ma-
She's thinking about a career in banking since she's studying finance.
bank,
He suddenly has the consciousness of being late.
consciousness, rotten, bacon, pious, mole, glacier, slender, lovable, maple, banking, consciousness, rotten, bacon, pious, mole, glacier, slender, lovable, maple, banking, consciousness,
The company has its business extension across the country.
ex-
The ventilation equipment in the ceiling keeps the air fresh.
ventilation,
The Congress voted in favor of the new legislation.
legislation,
The worker is using a lathe to shape the wood.
lathe,
The verge of the road is covered with lovely blue flowers.
ver,
The brash man was talking loudly in the cinema.
brass,
The can is much smaller after being compressed.
Com-
He tied a knot that is very difficult to untie.
Un-
The electric eel can discharge and use its current against smaller fish.
discharge,
Art-
mobilize, extension, ventilation,
The Congress voted in favor of.
legislation,
The worker is using a lathe to shape.
lathe, verge, brash, compress, untie, discharge, mobilize, extension, ventilation, ventilation, legislation, lathe, verge, brash, compress, untie, discharge, mobilize, legislation, lathe, rotten, rotten, bacon, pious, 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 mole, mole, glacier, 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 slender, slender. Lovable, maple, maple, maple. Banking, consciousness, consciousness. Consciousness, consciousness. Pious, glacier, slender, slender. Maple, maple. Consciousness, consciousness. Slender, extension, extension. Ventilation, ventilation, ventilation. Ventilation. Verge, verge, verge. Brash, brash. Compress, 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 compress. Compress, compress. Untie, discharge, 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 discharge. Mobilize, mobilize, mobilize. Mobilize. Legislation, legislation, legislation. Lathe, ventilation, ventilation. Verge, compress, compress. Discharge, 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 discharge. Mobilize, mobilize. Legislation, legislation. Discharge, discharge.